Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Bebo. In this video, we're going to take a look at solving problems that involve proportional relationships. Our learning target for this video is then, how do I solve problems that involve proportional relationships? We need to remind ourselves on some of the vocab that we have learned throughout this video series on proportional relationships, or throughout this unit on proportional relationships. And the first one is proportion, which is an equation that states that two ratios are equivalent. We're going to take a look more about that on the next slide. And then the other vocab word to keep in mind is this proportional relationship equation. And that just is, again, it's represented in the form y equals kx, where k is the constant of proportionality, which this is that constant ratio between these two quantities, and k actually has the same value as the unit rate. So with that being said, looking at a proportion, again, this is an equation stating that two ratios or rates are equivalent. So in a proportion, the cross products are going to be equal. In this example, they're saying we have 3 cups of milk for every 4 cups of flour. And they're telling us that's equivalent to 6 cups of milk for every 8 cups of flour, right? Because that's just double. So if I were to rewrite these ratios out and do the cross products, we're going to find that they're going to be equal to each other. So if we do 3 times 8 and 4 times 6, so again, cross products, you're taking the numerator of one ratio and multiplying by the denominator of the other, and then vice versa. We'll have 3 times 8. And we're asking, does that equal 6 times 4? And in this case, it for sure should, since they told us that these are equivalent ratios. So when you have equivalent ratios, those cross products are going to be equal. All right, so with that being said, that is one method that we can actually use. We can use cross products to help us solve these problems involving proportional relationships. As I tell my students, I don't care which method you can use whatever method works best for you. You can use a table, you can use a graph, you can use an equation, and you can also use cross products. And we're actually going to take a look at all of those examples in this video. So for example 1, we are taking a look at a problem where we are looking at the wait time for a roller coaster. So it tells us the wait time to ride a roller coaster is 20 minutes when 160 people are in line. How long is the expected wait time when 240 people are in line? And we're going to assume the relationship is proportional. So I'm going to show you all the different ways that we can go through and solve these types of problems. So for the first method, I'm going to use a table. So when I'm looking at this table, I'm trying to figure out basically how can I go from 160 to 240 so that I can then figure out what to multiply by to get to this question mark. The hard part about this, if I was going to try to go directly from 160 to 240, we would have to multiply by some fraction or decimal, and most students don't want to do that. So we can ask ourselves, is there a way that I can simplify this ratio down to a smaller value that I can then multiply easily to get to 240? And so if I'm looking at this, I like to think, well, if I divide this by 2, that's going to give me a value of 80, which if I'm doing that for the bottom values, I have to do the same math to the top here. So this is going to tell me it's 10 minutes for 80 people. And then hopefully we can see from here, I can then multiply this one by 3 to then find out that 10 times 3, that is going to be 30. So my answer is going to be 30 minutes. So a table is just a great way of being able to organize our different ratios. Again, by making them smaller, we could maybe make it bigger, and then seeing, again, a pattern of how we can come up with that missing value. So in this case, we divided and then we multiplied. Is this the only way to do this table? Nope, it's just the way that I chose to go through and do this. There are definitely other ways that you could have went through and created a table to come up with the same answer of 30 minutes. All right, so still the same problem, but now we're going to use a graph. So I already have this graph pre-made. Basically, you would create this on a quadrant 1 of our coordinate plane. And so what they did was they plotted 0, 0, because they said to assume the relationship is proportional. So we know it's going to go through 0, 0. And then they plotted the point 20, 160, right? So there's 20 minutes for 160 people. They drew a nice straight line through that, and then they were able to piece together that at 30, there is the 240 people. So 30 minutes for 240 people. Now, my issue with graphs is that sometimes we're not always the neatest with drawing them out, which is why I have the one that's pre-made, because it can be difficult for me on my Jamboard to draw it out nicely. So just be cautious with that one. It's a good method if you can draw really nice straight lines and you're very accurate with your graphing. But again, that is an option. Just make sure you're being neat with it so you can accurately read the data that is on the line. All right, so using an equation, basically with the equation, remember that it has to be in the form y equals kx, where k is the constant of proportionality, or again, it's the unit rate. So in this problem, we were told, again, it's 20 minutes when there's 160 people on line. So we can use that to find our value for k. So if we are looking at this, we can say k is equal to, again, our y value to our x value. And you can set this up either way. So if you want to let people be y and minutes be x, or vice versa, you are more than welcome to. Just make sure you're keeping in mind what values with what. So I'm going to go ahead and say my y value is people and my x value is going to be the time in minutes, just so that I can deal with a nice whole number. So 160 divided by 20, and so my k value is going to be 8, right? So basically that means it's 8 people per minute. So we're going to use the equation, which I've now wrote out, y equals 8x. We're going to use that equation to solve for the unknown value. So remember, y is the number of people. So in my equation, I'm going to plug in 240 people for y. So it's going to say 240 equals 8x. And now this is just a one-step equation. So to solve this one-step equation, we're going to divide both sides by 8. This will cancel out over here, right? This makes 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So you have 1x left on that side. 240 divided by 8 is going to be 30 equals x. So again, we find out that it's 30 minutes. So using an equation, especially after the last lesson, this is something that hopefully isn't too bad. It's a really good method that'll work, every time. All right, the last method that we can use is cross products. So cross products is a really great way to solve proportion problems. And again, you just need to make sure that you know what each value is talking about in the ratio. So again, 20 minutes for 160 people. So I'm going to write my ratio 20 over 160. And then I'm going to set that equal to, well, on the top here, I'm talking about time. So I want to make sure over on the top here, I'm also talking about time. And then on the bottom, that is the number of people. So I want to make sure, again, the number of people are on the other side here. So with proportions, again, you want to make sure that you're keeping things consistent. So with that being said, we don't know the time. That's my unknown value. But I do know that there's 240 people in that situation. So at this point, we're going to use our cross products to help us solve this. So essentially generating an equation that will solve. So we're going to do 20 times 240 and 160 times x. 20 times 240 is going to end up being 4,800, forgot to add an extra 0 on there, equals 160x. Then we will go through and basically end up solving this one-step equation, just like we did on that last question. We're going to divide both sides by what's in front of x here that's being multiplied. So we'll divide both sides by 160. And then we will find out that 4,800 divided by 160 is 30 minutes. So once again, our solution is 30 minutes. So that was a quick walkthrough of our 4 methods that we can use to solve these problems that involve proportional relationships. Thanks for watching, and make sure you check out part 2 if you need more examples.